My son looked at me through the rearview mirror and said, for words that would change everything, "You live here now." He wasn't asking, he was telling. The building in front of us wasn't the nice restaurant he'd promised, or the surprise visit to see my grandchildren. It was Willowbrook Care Facility, with its peeling paint and chain-link fence, at 73. I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal life could offer. I was wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to Wounded and Wise. The engine went quiet. My son didn't move to get out. He just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, waiting for me to understand. And I did. Oh, I understood perfectly. "Dad, I want to show you something special today." That's how it started 3 hours earlier. Michael had called me that morning, his voice unusually cheerful. He hadn't visited in 2 months, so when he offered to take me out for the day, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I put on my best shirt. The blue one my late wife Helen used to say brought up my eyes. I combed what was left of my grey hair and waited by the window like a schoolboy. When Michael pulled up in his new SUV, I climbed in with more energy than I'd felt in weeks. "Where are we going, son?" I asked as we drove through neighborhoods I didn't recognize. "You'll see, Dad. It's a surprise." We made small talk about the weather, about his job at the insurance company, about how the grandkids were doing in school. Normal father-son conversation. Nothing to warn me what was coming. The building appeared after we turned down a long, tree-lined street. My stomach dropped before my mind caught up. I've driven past places like this before, always feeling grateful I wasn't inside. The sign read Willowbrook Care Facility in faded blue letters. A few elderly residents sat on the front porch in wheelchairs, staring at nothing. Michael parked and turned around to face me. His expression had changed. The cheerful mask was gone, replaced by something harder, something that looked like duty mixed with guilt. "Dad, we need to talk." I already knew. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Cars passed on the street. A dog barked somewhere. Life continued while mine was ending. "Your health isn't what it used to be," he began, reciting what sounded like a prepared speech. "The house is too big for you now. You fell last month. Remember. What if nobody had found you?" I was fine. "Michael, it was just a small trip in the garden. This time, yes. But what about next time?" He gestured toward the building. "Look, I've already spoken with the director. They have a room available. It's clean, safe. You'll have people looking after you round the clock." I stared at the building. Behind those windows were people like me. People whose families had decided they were too much trouble, too expensive, too inconvenient for the lives their children wanted to live. "You live here now. Dad, it's better for everyone except me," I thought. But I didn't say it. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised from diapers, taught to ride a bicycle, helped through college, the man whose mortgage I'd helped pay when he first got married. The man who was now sitting in judgment of whether I deserved to live in my own home. "I see," I said quietly. "The staff seems nice. They'll help you with your medications. Make sure you eat regularly. And it's not like you'll be alone forever. I'll visit. The kids will visit." "No, you won't," I thought. "Once I disappear behind those doors, you'll visit twice, maybe 3 times, until guilt stops feeling like guilt and starts feeling like obligation you can avoid." "What about my house?" I asked. "We'll handle all that. Don't worry about the details. We'll handle it." "Not I'll handle it. We as if this had been a family discussion where everyone had a vote except the person it affected most. I sat there for another moment, watching an old man in a bathrobe shuffling across the parking lot with a walker. Is that what I look like to them? Is that what I become? Okay, I said. Michael's shoulders relaxed. He'd been prepared for a fight, for tears, for anger. He hadn't expected quiet acceptance. Dad, I know this is hard, but, I said. Okay, Michael. We sat in silence for another minute. Then I opened the car door and stepped out onto the asphalt. My legs felt steadier than they had in months. Funny how clarity can do that to a person. Michael helped me with my single suitcase, the one he'd asked me to pack that morning. Just a few things. Dad. Essentials. Now I understood why. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. The woman behind the desk had kind eyes but a practiced smile. She'd welcomed hundreds of people like me. People who arrive not by choice but by family decision. You must be Mr. Patterson, she said warmly. I'm Mrs. Rodriguez, the afternoon coordinator. Your son has told us so much about you. I wondered what exactly Michael had told them. That I was a burden. That I couldn't be trusted to live alone. That I'd become someone else's responsibility now. Michael shook hands with Mrs. Rodriguez, signed some papers, and gave me an awkward hug goodbye. I'll call you tomorrow. Dad, make sure you're settling in okay. He left me standing in that lobby with my single suitcase and 47 years of memories from the house I'd built with my own hands. The house where Helen and I had raised 3 children. The house where I'd planned to live out my remaining years, tending my garden and reading my books in peace. Mrs. Rodriguez showed me to room 247. It was clean and sterile, with a narrow bed, a small desk, and a window that looked out on the parking lot. My new home, my prison, my son's solution to the inconvenience of having an aging father. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at that window for a long time. Outside, life continued. People drove to jobs, to grocery stores, to homes where they belonged. And inside, I began to plan the first morning. I woke up at 5:30, same as I had for the past 40 years. But instead of making coffee in my own kitchen and reading the paper at my own table, I stared at the ceiling of room 247 and listened to the sounds of institutional life beginning round me. I didn't call Michael. I didn't call my daughter Sarah in Phoenix or my youngest, David, in Seattle. I wanted to see how long it would take them to check on the father they'd deposited like an unwanted package. The answer was 3 days. Sarah called first, her voice bright with forced cheer. Hi, Daddy. Michael told me you're getting settled in your new place. How do you like it? My new place, as if I'd chosen it myself. As if it were a condo in Florida instead of a way station. For people waiting to die. It's fine, sweetheart. Good. I knew you'd adapt. You always were flexible. And it's probably nice not having to worry about house maintenance anymore. Right? House maintenance. The garden I'd tended for 20 years. The roof I'd repair myself. The fence I'd painted every other summer. All those burdens I was now free from. Yes, I said. Very convenient. We talked for 10 minutes about nothing important. She promised to visit at Christmas, which was 8 months away. After I hung up, I realized she hadn't asked me a single question about how I actually felt. David called that evening. His conversation was nearly identical to Sarah's, down to the forced enthusiasm and vague promises about future visits. My children had coordinated their response. They'd agreed on the narrative. Dad is fine. This was necessary. Everyone's happy with the arrangement. Michael never called. But I wasn't sitting idle during those first few days. I was observing, listening, learning things my children didn't know I was capable of learning. I learned that Mrs. Chen in the room next to mine had been a mathematics professor before her family decided she was too forgetful to live alone. She still solved complex equations in her head while we ate breakfast together. I learned that Mr. Williams down the hall had owned 3 hardware stores before his son sold them and put him here. He could still tell you exactly how many screws and washers were in any drawer of any store he'd ever managed. I learned that Mrs. Thompson, the woman who shuffled past my room every afternoon at 2 o'clock, had been a celebrated pianist. Sometimes, late at night, I could hear her playing invisible keys on her bedside table, her fingers moving through pieces she'd performed at Carnegie Hall. And I learned something else. I learned that Willowbrook Care Facility was privately owned by a man named Robert Hensley, who lived in a mansion 20 miles away and hadn't visited his own facility in 2 years. I learned this from Jonair, the night nurse who'd worked here for 15 years and had plenty to say about Mr. Hensley's priorities. He raised the fees again last month. She told me one evening when she found me reading in the common room. Third time in 2 years. Some families can't afford it anymore. We've had to transfer 6 residents to state facilities. The places where people went when even places like this became too expensive for their families too. Justify, Mr. Hensley doesn't care, Donna continued, as long as his check's clear. He's happy. Last time he was here, he spent 10 minutes looking round and left. Didn't speak to a single resident. I asked careful questions about Mr. Hensley's business practices, about the building's maintenance issues, about the staff turnover rate. Jonair was happy to talk to someone who listened. Most residents here had stopped listening too. Anything years ago, on the 4th day, I took a walk around the neighborhood. Willowbrook sat on 2 acres of prime real estate in a developing area. New shopping centers were going up nearby. Property values were rising. I could see why someone like Hensley would see dollar signs when he looked at this place. But I could also see things Hensley couldn't. I could see that Mrs. Chen deserved better than a room that smelled like industrial cleaner. I could see that Mr. Williams deserved better than dinner at 4:30 every afternoon whether he was hung. Rye or not, I could see that Mrs. Thompson deserved better than a broken piano in the common room that hadn't been tuned in 5 years on the 5th day. I made a phone call, not to my children, but to my lawyer, James Morrison, who'd handled Helen's estate and had been trying to talk me into dating my will for the past 2 years. Robert, James said when he heard my voice, I've been wondering how you were settling in. Michael mentioned you'd moved to a care facility. James, I need you to do something for me, quietly. Of course. What do you need? I want you to look into purchasing a property. Commercial property. I'll give you the details. There was a pause. Robert, are you sure this is something you want to take on right now? I mean, given your current situation, my current situation, everyone had an opinion about my current situation except me. James, I'm 73 years old, not dead. My mind works fine. My finances are my own business. Can you help me, or should I find another lawyer? No, of course I can help. Tell me what you're thinking. I told him what I was thinking. I told him about Willowbrook Care Facility, about Robert Hensley, about the 2 acres of prime real estate that housed 120 forgotten people whose families had written them off. I want to buy it, James, the whole operation. Robert, that's a significant investment. Are you certain? I've never been more certain of anything in my life. On the 6th day, James called me back. Robert Hensley was indeed interested in selling. The facility had been losing money for 2 years due to increased regulation and staffing requirements. He'd been looking for a buyer but hadn't found anyone willing to take on what he called the headache of dealing with old people. The price was reasonable, more than reasonable. Henley wanted out badly enough to accept an offer 20% below market value. I can have the papers drawn up by next week. James said, "But Robert, this is a cash transaction. Are you prepared for that?" I was prepared. Helen and I had been careful with money our entire marriage. We'd invested wisely, lived below our means, saved for a retirement we thought we'd spend together. After her death, I'd lived even more simply. The house was paid off. My expenses were minimal. And the investment portfolio James had managed for us had grown considerably over the years. Michael and my other children knew I wasn't poor, but they had no idea how much I'd accumulated over 40 years of careful financial planning. They never asked, and I'd never told them. They'd assumed that putting me in Willowbrook was partly a financial necessity, that I couldn't afford alternatives. They were wrong about many things. This was just one more. On the 7th day, I signed the papers. Willowbrook Care Facility, 2 acres of prime real estate, 120 residents, 43 staff members, and all the headaches Robert Hensley couldn't wait to escape. Now belonged to me. I owned the place my son had dumped me in. I owned the building, the land, the business, and everything in it. I owned my own prison, which meant I could unlock the doors whenever I chose. But I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I wanted to walk these halls for a few more days as just another forgotten old man whose family had written him off. I wanted to see things through those eyes for a little while longer. Because I had plans, and those plans required patience. The first thing I did was nothing. For 3 more days, I continued living as Robert Patterson, resident of room 247, the man whose son had decided he was too much trouble to keep around. I ate the bland institutional meals, attended the scheduled activities, and watched the staff go through their routines with the weary efficiency of people who'd stopped caring years ago. But I was watching everything now with different eyes. These weren't just my temporary surroundings anymore. This was my business. These were my employees. These were my residents. And things were going to change. On the 10th day, I asked to speak with Mrs. Rodriguez privately. She assumed I had complaints or requests, the way most residents did when they called her into their rooms. Her expression was polite but guarded when she sat down across from my narrow desk. "What can I help you with, Mr. Patterson? I want to talk to you about your job." Maria, she looked surprised that I'd used her first name. "My job? How long have you worked here?" "8 years this December." "Do you like it?" She paused, probably wondering if this was some kind of test. Residents sometimes reported staff members for complaining about their work conditions. "It has its challenges," she said carefully. "I imagine it does. Tell me, if you could change 3 things about this place, what would they be?" Now she looked genuinely confused. "Mr. Patterson, I'm not sure what you're asking." Humor. "Me? Pretend you had unlimited authority to improve Willowbrook. What would you do first?" Something in my tone must have convinced her I was serious. She leaned back in her chair and considered the question. "The food?" She said finally. "The kitchen budget is so tight we serve the same 12 meals over and over. These people deserve better nutrition and more variety." I nodded. "What else?" "Staffing. We're understaffed on every shift. The night nurse handles 40 patients alone. It's not safe. But Mr. Hensley won't approve hiring anyone else. And the third thing, activities, real activities. Not just bingo twice a week and a television room. These people have minds. Mr. Patterson. They have interests and talents and stories. Mrs. Chen was a professor. Did you know that? Mr. Williams owned businesses. Mrs. Thompson was a pianist. But we treat them all like they're just bodies we need to keep alive until their families visit twice a year. I smiled for the first time since I'd arrived at Willowbrook. Maria, how would you like to be the new director of operations? She stared at me. I'm sorry. What? Robert Hensley sold this facility. The new owner wants to make some changes, starting with promoting the people who actually care about the residents. Mr. Patterson, I don't understand what you're saying. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, I could see Mrs. Thompson sitting alone on a bench, moving her fingers as if she were playing piano on her lap. The new owner is me, Maria. I bought Willowbrook 3 days ago. The silence stretched so long I turned round to make sure she was still there. She was. But her mouth was open and she was staring at me like I'd announced I was from Mars. You bought it. Every brick, every bed, every broken chair in the common room. It's mine now. But you're a resident. I'm also the owner, and your new boss, if you want the job. She stood up slowly, looking round the room as if seeing it for the first time. Mr. Patterson, this is incredible. I mean, I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me turn this place into somewhere you'd want your own parents to live. That evening, I met with Jeanna, the night nurse who'd told me about Hensley's neglect. Then I spoke with Tony, the maintenance supervisor who'd been requesting basic repairs for 2 years. Then with Carmen, the activities coordinator who'd been trying to start a reading group with a budget of $50 a month. One by one, I told them the truth, that I owned Willowbrook now, that things were going to change, that their ideas mattered and their dedication would be rewarded. The news spread through the staff like wildfire. By the next morning, people were looking at me differently. The same employees who'd spoken to me with practiced patience now called me sir and asked if there was anything they could do for me, but I still hadn't told the residents. And I definitely hadn't told my family. I wanted Michael to find out the way he'd told me about my new living arrangements, as a surprise he wasn't expecting and couldn't control. The changes started small. The kitchen began serving fresh bread with dinner. The broken television in the common room was replaced with a large-screen model. The activities budget was increased by a factor of 10, and Carmen started planning field trips to museums and concerts. Mrs. Chen got a whiteboard for her room so she could work on mathematical proofs. Mr. Williams was invited to consult on renovating the maintenance workshop. Mrs. Thompson's piano was tuned, and a music teacher was hired to come in 3 times a week for anyone interested in lessons or just listening to live music. The residents noticed immediately. There was more talking in the dining room, more laughter in the common areas. People who'd been sleepwalking through their days started taking interest in their surroundings. Again, something's different round. Here, Mrs. Chen told me over breakfast, the staff seems happier, more motivated. I smiled and buttered my toast. Maybe they just needed someone to remind them why they chose this work in the first place. It's more than that, she said, studying me with the sharp eyes that had once guided graduate students through complex proofs. You're different too, Robert. When you first arrived, you looked like a man who'd given up. Now you look like a man with a secret. She was right. I did have a secret. And in 3 days, when Michael came for his first visit since dropping me off, I was going to share it with him. Michael called on Sunday morning to say he'd be stopping by that afternoon. It had been 2 weeks since he'd left me at Willowbrook, which I suspected was about how long his guilt had taken to transform into the kind of obligation that required a visit. I won't be able to stay long. Dad, just wanted to check in and see how you're settling in. That's fine. Son, I'll be in the common room at 2 o'clock. I spent the morning making final preparations. The new furniture had arrived on Friday comfortable. Chairs ranged in conversation areas instead of the old institutional seating that had faced a single television like church pews. Fresh flowers sat on every table. Classical music played softly from speakers Carmen had installed throughout the room. Mrs. Thompson was at the piano, playing Chopin for a small audience of residents and staff members. Mrs. Chen sat in one of the new chairs, working through equations on her whiteboard while 3 other residents watched with fascination. Mr. Williams was in the corner, explaining the proper way to restore antique furniture to anyone who'd listen. The place looked alive in a way it hadn't 2 weeks ago. It looked like somewhere people might actually want to spend time. I was sitting in my favorite chair, reading a book I'd ordered from the facility's new library budget, when Michael walked in. I watched him over the top of my page as he stopped just inside the doorway, looking confused. This wasn't the scene he'd expected. He'd expected to find his father wilted and resigned, sitting alone in a sterile room, grateful for any attention from the outside world. Instead, he found a place that looked like a cross between a bookstore and a music salon, with his father sitting comfortably in the middle of it all. "Dad," he said, walking over to me. "Hello." "Michael." I closed my book and stood up to embrace him. He looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure he was in the right place. "This is different," he said, looking round the room. "Is it?" I suppose I hadn't noticed. We sat down together, and I watched Michael try to reconcile what he was seeing with what he'd expected to find. The old Michael would have asked me directly what had changed. This new Michael, the one who made decisions about my life without consulting me, seemed to think he wasn't entitled to ask questions anymore. "You look good, Dad. Better than I expected." "Did you expect me to look worse?" He shifted in his chair. "I just thought the adjustment might be difficult. Moving to a new place at your age. Yes, it could have been difficult. If I'd had to stay in the place you brought me to." Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Willowbrook has changed quite a bit since you left me here. New management, you could say." As if on cue, Maria Rodriguez walked over to us. She was wearing a professional suit instead of her usual scrubs, and her entire demeanor radiated the confidence of someone who'd been empowered to make decisions instead of just following orders. "Good afternoon, Mr. Patterson," she said to me, then turned to Michael. "You must be Michael. I'm Maria Rodriguez, the new director of operations." Michael shook her hand, looking puzzled. "New director? What happened to? I mean, when my father moved in, there was someone else. Mr. Henley sold the facility." Mia said smoothly. "The new owner has made quite a few improvements. I'm sure your father would be happy to show you round." Michael looked at me. "Dad, did you know about this?" "Oh, yes," I said, standing up. "I know all about it. Come on, let me give you the tour." I led him through the building, pointing out the changes, the expanded kitchen where a real chef now prepared meals from scratch, the new library with comfortable reading chairs and a collection that reflected the actual interests of the Resi. Dense, the renovated activity rooms were. Mrs. Chen was teaching a mathematics discussion group and Mr. Williams was leading a woodworking class. "This is incredible," Michael said as we walked past the music room where Mrs. Thompson was giving a piano lesson to other residents. "It's like a completely different place. It is a completely different place." "Who bought it?" "Some kind of non-profit organization." We'd reached the administrative offices. Through the glass doors, Michael could see the nameplate on what had once been Robert Hensley's office. It now read Robert Patterson, owner. Michael stopped walking. He stared at that nameplate for a long moment, then looked at me. Dad, you left me here. Michael, you told me I'd live here now, as if I had no choice in the matter, as if my life was something you could arrange without consulting me. His face went pale. You bought this place. I bought this place the day after you left me here. I started making phone calls. By the end of the week, I owned it. Michael sat down heavily in one of the chairs outside the office. But how? I mean, where did you get the money? Your mother and I saved money our entire marriage. We invested wisely. We live below our means. I've been managing those investments carefully since she died. Did you think I was poor? We thought. You thought I was broke and helpless and grateful to have anyone take care of the burden of my existence. Michael's voice was quiet now. Dad, it wasn't like that, wasn't it? You drove me here without warning, told me I'd live here now as if I were a child, and left me with a suitcase and instructions not to worry about the details. We were trying to help. You were trying to solve a problem. The problem of having a father who reminded you that you're going to get old someday too. We sat in silence for a moment. Through the office windows, we could see the facility humming with activity. Residents engaged in meaningful conversations, staff members who looked energized instead of defeated, a community instead of a warehouse. The place looks incredible, Michael said finally. It looks like what it always could have been if someone had cared enough to invest in it. Are you angry with me? I considered the question. 2 weeks ago, I would have said yes. I was angry and hurt and betrayed by the son who'd treated me like a problem to be solved instead of a person to be respected. But now, sitting in the administrative offices of the facility I owned, surrounded by people whose lives I was helping to improve, I found that the anger had transformed into something else. Something that felt more like disappointment mixed with hope. I'm not angry. Michael, I'm sad that you thought so little of me that you assumed I couldn't handle my own life. I'm sad that you were so uncomfortable with the idea of me getting older that you decided to hide me away where you wouldn't have to think about it. Michael was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I was scared. Dad, after Mom died, and then when you fell in the garden, I was scared something would happen to you, and it would be my fault for not taking better care of you. So you decided to take away my choices instead of asking me what I wanted. I thought this was what you needed. What I needed was for my son to talk to me like I was still a human being capable of making decisions about my own life. Michael wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I'm sorry. Dad, I'm really sorry. I know you are. Can you forgive me? I looked round at the place that had become my unlikely kingdom, at the residents who'd rediscovered purpose and dignity, at the staff members who now took pride in their work, at the son who'd learned that his father wasn't as helpless as he'd assumed. Michael, you brought me here because you thought I was finished. You thought my useful life was over and all that was left was managing my decline. Dad, but you were wrong. I wasn't finished. I was just getting started on the most important thing I've ever done. I stood up and put my hand on his shoulder. You're forgiven, son, and you're welcome to visit any time. Just call first. I'm a busy man now. 6 months later. I wake up every morning at 5:30 in room 147 of Willowbrook Care Facility. Same as always. But everything else has changed. The first thing I hear isn't the institutional sounds of shift changes and medication cuts. It's Mrs. Thompson playing piano in the common room, practicing for tonight's concert. The second thing I hear is laughter from the dining room. where Mrs. Chen is probably explaining some mathematical concept to anyone willing to listen while she drinks the real coffee we started serving instead of the brown water Robert. Hensley considered acceptable. My morning routine now includes reviewing reports from RIA about occupancy rates and staffing schedules, approving budgets for new programs, and planning improvements to the facility. Yesterday, we broke ground on the new greenhouse where residents can grow their own vegetables and flowers. Next month, we're opening an art studio in what used to be a storage room. The business is thriving. Word has spread about what Willowbrook has become. And we have a waiting list for the first time in years. But more importantly than the financial, success is the transformation I see in the people who live and work here. Mr. Williams convinced me to let him supervise the renovation of the entire workshop facility. Now, he teaches woodworking classes 3 days a week and has completed custom furniture orders for half the rooms in the building. Mrs. Chen started a tutoring program for local high school students who need help with advanced mathematics. They come here twice a week, and she's never been happier. Mrs. Thompson doesn't play invisible piano on her bedside table anymore. She plays the real piano in our music room. And last month she gave a recital that filled every seat in our expanded common area. 3 of her former students drove from states away to attend. The staff turnover rate, which had been over 60% under Hensley's management, is now less than 10%. Maria Rodriguez has become one of the most respected care facility directors in the state. Jeanne, the night nurse, is pursuing her master's degree in gerontology with tuition assistance from the facility. Tony, the maintenance supervisor, now manages a team of 6 people instead of struggling alone. But the changes go beyond the building and the programs and the financial reports. They go to the heart of what it means to age with dignity in a society that prefers to look away from its elderly. Michael visits every Sunday now, not out of guilt or obligation, but because he's genuinely interested in what I'm doing. He brings his children, my grandchildren, who love hearing Mrs. Thompson play piano and watching Mr. Williams carve wooden toys in the workshop. They're learning that old age isn't something to fear or hide from, but a continuation of life that can be productive and meaningful. Sarah called me last month from Phoenix. Her voice wasn't artificially bright anymore when she asked about my new place. She was genuinely curious about the facility and proud of what I'd accomplished. She's planning a visit in the spring, and she wants to bring her husband and children to see what she calls Grandpa's Empire. David calls every week from Seattle. Not to check on me, but to ask my advice about business decisions he's facing. It turns out that owning and operating a successful care facility has reminded my children that I spent 40 years running my own contracting business, and might actually know something about management and leadership. But the real measure of what we've accomplished here isn't in the financial reports, or even in the improved quality of life for residents. It's in the way people look at themselves and each other. It's in the way Mrs. Chen straightens her shoulders when she talks about her mathematics classes. It's in the way Mr. Williams' eyes light up when he shows someone a piece of furniture he's restored. It's in the way Mrs. Thompson smiles when she plays piano, not for an invisible audience, but for people who appreciate her talent. It's in the way visitors react when they walk into Willowbrook now. They don't see a warehouse for warehousing inconvenient elderly people. They see a community where people continue to grow and contribute and matter. 3 months ago, Robert Hensley stopped by unannounced. He'd heard about the changes and wanted to see what I'd done with the place he'd been so eager to unload. He walked through the facilities with increasing amazement, taking notes on improvements he never would have imagined implementing himself. This is remarkable, he told me as we sat in my office. You've completely transformed this place. How did you know to do all this? I lived here. I said simply. I saw what these people needed because I needed it too. He left shaking his head, probably wondering how much money he could have made if he'd cared enough to see residents as people instead of problems last week. I was contacted by a group of investors who want me to consult on similar facility improvements. Across 3 states, they're offering a substantial fee for my expertise in creating care environments that actually care about the people they serve. I told them I'd consider it. But that Willowbrook would always be my primary focus. This is where I learned that. Being abandoned doesn't mean you're finished. It just means you're free to start over on your own terms, tonight. Like every night, I'll walk through the halls of Willowbrook before I go to sleep. I'll stop by the music room where Mrs. Thompson might still be practicing. I'll check on Mrs. Chen, who often works late on mathematical problems that fascinate her. I'll make sure Mr. Williams has turned off all the power tools in his workshop. But mostly, I'll walk through these halls knowing that I took the worst thing my children ever did to me and transformed it into the best thing I ever did for myself and for 120 other people who deserve to age with dignity and purpose. They thought they were putting me away. Instead, they gave me the opportunity to discover what I was truly capable of accomplishing. They thought I was finished. I was just beginning again. And every morning when I wake up at 5:30 in room 247, I remember that freedom isn't about where you live or who makes decisions for you. Freedom is about recognizing that as long as you're breathing, you have choices to make and contributions to offer. My son brought me here thinking my story was ending. He was wrong. It was just beginning a new chapter. And this chapter, the one I'm writing myself, is turning out to be the most meaningful one yet. The boy who used to build tree houses with me is now a man who understands that his father never stopped being capable of building something beautiful. The difference is that now, instead of building with wood and nails, I'm building with hope and dignity and the radical idea that every person deserves respect regardless of their age. Every morning at Willowbrook, people wake up knowing they matter. They have purpose. They have choices. They have a future that extends beyond just waiting for the end. That's what real freedom looks like. That's what it means to refuse to be finished until you decide you're finished. And I'm nowhere close to being finished yet.